Welcome to the 2-Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a book, talk about menage a trois, various other sexual peccadillos, and break it down, do things, I don't know, make jokes. Anyways, this is our Ann Quin season, and we are moving on. We did Finishberg, and we are now on to 3, which exists in this and other stories version. And for those who are watching, the Stelkey version with an introduction by Brian Evanson in one and Joshua Cohen in the other. And this is the book. This is the first Ann Quin book I read. I'm going to say that right off the jump, that when I went to Delkey and mentioned her to John O'Brien, and he said that he had her books and pointed them out, this was the one that jumped out to me because of the crazy layout, the poetic looking layout.
Yeah.
And then triptychs. But I was like, triptychs as well because it has drawings and whatever else. But I was like, well, triptychs I'm not ready for. 3 is the place to start. So this is the first one that I read by her. So I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox. How you doing, Brian?
It's another lovely day. 40 degrees, a little bit of rain. Doesn't get any better than that.
Some good snow coming. It's supposed to be like a foot of snow by Sunday. This is going to be great. Welcome to
Rochester. We're in Buffalo Bills territory, and they lost, so it's just great. It's God weeping, literally weeping for the loss of our beloved Bills. So,
Hey, Alex has decided that he wants the Bills to win because his friend at school likes them. And I was like, that's how it starts. Next thing you know, you're going to be smoking and having like premarital sex and doing heroin.
My daughter's 7. It's her favorite teen as well. I'm not sure why. I think because she was born in Rochester, but she started smoking Parliament Lights.
Nice. Parliament's the way to go. I have to say, Parliament Lights was my cigarette of choice.
Such a
everyone I knew
kid.
was a stoner smoked Parliaments.
It's the recessed filter that lets you click it when you're ashing. So cool.
Badass. You never look as cool as you do when you're smoking.
Yeah. So I don't have the Delkey version. What if you were to summarize? What's Brian's introduction?
I was reading it as you came on here.
Okay.
Literally, and it is not the same as Joshua's. It's more straightforward. I in fact think that this is the essay, part of the essay that exists within the review of contemporary fiction about Quin that he and Joanna Howard wrote. It's pretty straightforward, but it talks a little bit about the fact that when this came out, it was heavily reviewed. I mean, it was widely reviewed, mostly by experimental writers like Robert Nye, Ellen Burns, and B.S. Johnson. And it was called a skillful book that needs reading more than once, and readers may feel the same confusion as did the early readers of Virginia Woolf. Quin is the most naturally and delicately gifted novelist of her generation. It's exquisitely written from the first page to the last. If you don't read it, then you're not interested in the present and possible future of the English novel. So some pretty high praise there. And then he talks a bit about the fact, this is the paragraph that I was at, that sort of is the one that I think is maybe the most crucial here, is so I'll just read this whole thing because it's pretty good. This is from Brian Evanson. Yet it is less the story itself than Quin's technique that makes 3 as an intriguing and remarkably successful novel. Quin operates in a world that seems mimetic, but in which the real has in fact undergone a subtle disorientation. She is less interested in creating a mirror of the real world than in allowing the characters to perform. In 3, the characters participate in mime plays, wearing white robes and masks, but their acting does not end there. They do not live their lives so much as they perform them. Leonard and Ruth play out certain roles, entering into conversations that deliberately seem staged. It is difficult to tell when they're acting and when, if ever, they are being genuine. As S says about Ruth, it is, quote, as if R plays a role when he, Leonard, is with us, except I wonder if it is not a certain role she plays with me when we are on our own.
Oh, interesting.
Which the mimesis and the reality thing does show up very in Joshua Cohen's introduction too, in which he has one of my favorite paragraphs of an introduction ever, which we were laughing about beforehand, and I'm going to read because I love it. Because this is such a frank and personal book, I will speak frankly and personally myself. Like Ann Quin and like her characters, I too have problems with monogamy and realism, those two fantasies, those twin delusions of how to live and reproduce life, monogamy, and how to represent life and reproduce its representations, realism. And I read that, was like, yep! Fuck yeah, Joshua Cohen. I haven't read your books in forever. One of his books is published by Delkey Vitz, but he won the Pulitzer Prize this past year for his book that came out from NYRB. He's like, an established, like, very intellectual novelist, has a very sad literary young man picture, and is apparently like anti-monogamy, and I love it.
I like with his introduction as well, he really kind of focuses on, obviously the number 3, the triangles, getting out of binaries, and how it messes with logic. Which when you take that and when you take this people playing their roles and the idea of things being staged and kind of breaking from that, that's a really kind of that might be a neat lens to be reading this through, I think.
Yeah, actually, like, I was really fascinated. I didn't look up yet the what is it? It's not Trilloism. What did he say it was called? Like the ternary or trinary logic, and he suggested triolectics as a Google. I'm like fascinated by this, because I like grew up mentally within the framework of the Pynchon books, where like everything binary is bad, and everything with like a third option is better, or like something that is and rather than either or. And so like anything that like speaks to that seems really interesting to me. And I think that's kind of why I was like so enthralled with this book the first time I read it. Although rereading it now, I'm like, this is confusing as fuck.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because like, it's one of the kind of hallmarks of postmodernism, right? Is taking down these established structures, fragmentation, confusion. What do we know? Questioning knowledge, certainty, and sometimes it's like games and paradoxes and that sort of stuff. And I feel like, and this feels like it's like firmly planted in that kind of I don't know, garden bed of literary flowers. But I feel like now I think like we're kind of swinging back out of that into like the binary again, oddly enough, where it's like this or that, and like you pick a camp and you're into that camp and you go, and like there's less I don't know and more like it feels like we're getting back to like just straight realism. And I don't know, I feel like with the stuff I've been reading, maybe it's just stuff I've been reading, but in terms of like,
reading, yeah,
I feel like we've come out of postmodernism and are embracing something closer to like a new type of realism.
Isn't that kind of like the Jonathan Franzen influence, and like the MFA influence is very much
geared? Yeah, I feel like that's always a topic for like another day of like what is the MFA program doing to American literature?
Right. I mean, and it's easy cow to pick at, but like it also like that one book that I think I've talked about on here, but I've still not finished, about Amazon and the influence of Amazon on the contemporary novel. It fits into there too, but with the difference that like in there, the guy's main argument, I think it's Mark McGurl, who his argument is that like the trilogy is the core American literary concept now. Which maybe fits into 3 a little bit more than it does the binary thing. But otherwise, I think that like the Amazon way of realism is very binary and is very like cinematic, down to earth, structured. I made my students watch book trailers today, and they're all so fucking bad, like embarrassing, cringy bad. Like, and I show them ones that I know are really cringy, like the trailer. If anyone is listening to this and has not seen it, look up the Gary Steingart book, Super Sad True Love Story. It's a trailer from 2010, and it is literally a trailer, a piece of YouTube history that has not aged at all. There are jokes about quote unquote homos. There are jokes about Socratic method. There's a joke about how he gets paid with 3 recently graduated debutantes from Mount Holyoke. Jay McInerney shows up to like seduce the women. Like, it's real fucked up. Like, it's really, really, really cringy. And I show it to all my class. I'm always like, guys, I feel really bad about this, trigger warning, blah, blah, blah. But like, this was the like pinnacle of trailer making for Random House. They had 339,000 views of this fucking trailer. And it's awful. But then I showed one that I just Googled, like, what's a new book trailer? And it was a fantasy novel But in relationship to the fantasy novel, it was with this woman and this guy who are like running with their swords and they like knife, and it was all very realistic. Everything about it was cinematic. And I feel like that's like the dominating form of like that sort of cinema, which I only belaboring this point because I feel like 3, what's interesting about the cut up sections with her voice or film or whatever that is that's going on there, that's all cut up, is also like cinema, but like that, again, like that 60s Godard sort of cinema where there's like ellipses and there's it's the word for the pauses in the middle, caesuras, like things that are like missing and are incomplete and are like kind of layered on top of one another without any clarity. And I feel like that's a more interesting version of cinematic writing than the cinema of like realism is a person can walk in this way and have this sort of interaction.
Yeah. I liked it too, with this idea of like this, the cliche love triangle, right? Mm-hmm. The like staid, boring, like Brian calls it like a play, but like this boring ho hum, monogamy of what a couple is. And then when we get to the other part, this weird experimental cut up part, then it's like the idea of when you add this into the book, like you can make something more than what it is. You can have something real, something exciting, something new, something fresh. Like I love the way that looks visually, and it reads to the ear, and you can hear it. But I think it's a really cool interpretation of introducing something to a binary.
So if I understand what you're saying, right? What you're saying is monogamous marriage is terribly claustrophobic and boring. And once you add in a new person, it's exciting and fresh with new viewpoints.
Yeah, that is exactly precisely what I said, and it is on record. Yes.
On record, you are so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that your wife listens to all of these.
Yeah, totally. No, I just found that like really, I don't know, it was just really cool to see how that worked on the page and how it works for the characters as well. It's a really neat technique.
I agree. So let's try and get into like part of this. I have a lot of questions, and as you said, you might not have a lot of answers. I don't know that I do either, but I still have enough questions. So the main setup and again, correct me when I'm wrong here because God only knows, is that there are Ruth and Leonard. They're married. They're a married couple. He is 40, I believe, is stated in there to give this like some sort of like perspective as to their age. And then there is a younger woman named S, that's only referred to as S, who comes to live with them for, I believe, from March until October of this given year at this house that he inherited, ? That has a pool that is empty, but is filled with like half-built sculptures or half-run-down sculptures in which they do sometimes mime plays within there and acting. They live near the sea, but again, I don't think it's a defined sea, but could be like the Brighton Sea, whatever. And at the beginning of the book, S has drowned and had a suicide note in her pocket. So they believe that she's committed suicide, which is, again, the Ann Quin story. So when we left off with Berg started looking at the sea and being like, and everything having drowned and revived from that, this one we start with like a woman who does kill herself through drowning, theoretically. Why does she kill herself? They don't really know. And they sort of like, this becomes like an existential mystery of sorts as to like what happened with her. And so we get their conversation, which is very entropic, in my opinion, very like Pynchonian trap. They're in this house. They want to leave this house. They talk about the same things. They're like, and I think their dialogue is extraordinarily funny, and can be acted out amazingly well. And then they find videos/audio tapes of S talking about things. And in those sections, in the one section we get of that here specifically, S is like very close to Ann Quin's life. Like she doesn't know her father. Her father was an actor or singer, I think, in here. Meets him at one point in time. Doesn't really retain a relationship with him. Is part of a convent. The part that I don't know is part of Ann Quin's life, and I don't really think it matters, is that, and I may be wrong about this, this is one of my questions, is that I believe that Essen here is pregnant and is going to give a kid up for adoption, but I do not think she has the child. Am I making that up? We'll get to that.
I don't think so. But
Leon, I also believe has some affiliation with Germans, but we can talk about that and like those crazy moments in a second. And then there's diaries of like the two, Ruth and Leonard or Leon, but their diaries are dumb. And then there's diaries from S that sort of explain in more concrete detail this sort of like her relationship to this couple, and how like she and the guy, I believe it's just the guy, although maybe both of them. I don't think that it's necessarily like 1000% clear, but I think that she and Leon have an affair. There's like a hot sex scene at the end of the part that we read for today, which I'm sure we'll super dive into. I'm sure I'll read every word of that in a minute, but that's sort of the layout, is that and I believe it's the end of the season, so it's October. After October, they're going to be leaving this place and going back to the city, but they don't know if they really want to. Everything's like a little up in the air, and that their relationship is a little bit like fraudulent in a variety of like stiff ways, or like as Brian references, it's active ways. According to Kaya in Evanson's introduction, it claims that she has an abortion.
Yeah, that was the feeling I got, because there's that discussing, I think it was like congealed, like a gynecologist's finger or something like that. There's a really concrete image that was
right. It's on page 37 and 38. So 37 is the one where it's like confirmed psychiatrist. Wouldn't you like to help a childless couple then? And that's where I'm like, wants to put the baby up for adoption. Then the next page, 38, made ready in white, like half drunk, must not lose consciousness. Various instruments, wad of blood retained shape of gynecologist's finger, low voices in an anteroom, cylindrical light above, chromium, breathe deeply, push. Where is it? Was it big enough to see? 3 months. What did they do with it? In a bottle? Throw away? A cab back, not enough change for a tip. So yeah, so abortion is like I would interpret that the same way. So, and to bounce that off of, the couple is theoretically trying to have a child, and they talk about it in like two different ways, where she talks about they talk about the desire to have a child, and she talks about her tracking her temperature, and then reflects on Leon's journal, which has all these black crosses in it, which every time they fuck. To keep track of those two things, but they seem to quote unquote want a child, but also like they're super dysfunctional, I think. Mm-hmm. I do like that he hates the cat.
Yeah, so many threes. I'm surprised.
In my house for the next 10 days.
Yeah, that would be the super shitty professor thing to do with this book, is have the readers take the title 3 and find all of the threes that you can in this. Right. Pregnancy. There's trimesters. We have, what I'm wondering is, maybe it'll
seasons, spring, summer, and fall.
Yeah, maybe it'll reveal itself later. But I'm curious that she gives the couple. They have 3 names, right? We have like Leonard, Leon, L, Ruth, Ruthie, R. So they each have 3 names. But then there's only S. There's nothing else for her, just S. So I'm interested in what that'll end up being.
We were reading this aloud a little bit the other night, and it is so funny to read their back and forth. Their back and forth is wonderful. Evanson points this out, and I think what's really unique about it is that she does, in terms of writing dialogue, which I think is incredibly difficult to do in this way now. I think this book would be savaged by like a lot of like editors and or like peer review readers, is that she starts on one path and then you have to reread it because she switches gears in the middle of the sentence to like something else. And like there's no pause or there's no period, there's no like transition, but it's clearly like a transition from statement A into statement B that sort of overlap at like a word, but don't really like, you have to like mind-wise make those two things fit. which I think is super fun. So here's go on.
Oh, I'm curious the reason she wanted to use that technique. And I wonder if it was trying to get the sound of real speech and the way we interrupt each other, that we'll share a word and take over for each other, or it's this kind of like moving, living, amorphous thing. Whereas if I indent and use quotation marks, you turn into like building blocks or something, and that's not the way it works. Where it's just fluid and moving, and it feels that way when it's all in one giant paragraph.
Yeah, I really like that kind of like that nonstop dialogue. Like sometimes, like last week when we talked about how she used paragraph breaks, and I was like, "This fuck is a paragraph break to this woman." Like it can be anything. And here, what it seems to function as is a paragraph break is when it goes from their conversation together to one person's observations alone, and then the next person's observation alone, and then the next paragraph is back to the two of them interacting. And it really does remind me of, I can't think of the name of it. It might just be Entropy, but I want to call it Hot House. But there's a short story, a Pynchon short story I read many, many years ago that's in that Slow Learner collection of his, in which it's about a couple that lives in essentially like a closed, sealed system of like a hothouse or a space. And as such, according to the rules of physics, your energy dies out. Like, right? Like you hit, like everything becomes static, things die. And I feel like this book keeps playing with that same idea. Like they're in the house, they open the windows to get like new energy in. He goes outside. There's a lot of like this back and forth to going outside to like revive things, but that otherwise they're in this space and their language starts to deteriorate and becomes like sort of similar and uninteresting and like punctuated in a way. I'm talking on my ass. So on page 7 is one of the beginning parts where I was just like, I don't really know what his fucking story is, Leon's story at all. I got really confused. So there's a beginning part where she's talking about like nothing in comparison to your big ideas, such as creating a new world. Imagine a boy of 16 who thought he could do that. She powdered over the red tracks in her eyebrows, brushed her powder from her dress. What did you hope to prove by all that anyway? Prove, Ruth? I just believe that's all saw myself as a sort of disciple, an agent, if you like, at least to begin with. And then lower on it says, youngsters. He's like indirectly after one, or she says, yes, you still had that fanaticism about you. Did you ever mention your role in the war to her? That's one of the ones where you have to split the sentence. Yes, you still have that fanaticism about you. Did you ever mention your role in the war to her? But that's all like one unpunctuated sentence in the book. Indirectly, after all, one never knows how it'll affect people. Besides, she was hardly born when the war began, and youngsters jump immediately to conclusions. You mean treason and all that? Well, let's face it, you were interned. All those poems you wrote while in prison. Think of them all. So wait, what is happening here? And then, like, there's a later part.
You're talking about Germans, right? So
what?
So if he's a prisoner of war, so he's writing poems while being detained by Germans.
Except that, if you look on, find it. It's in his later on in the section about. Yeah, here. Sunday on page 58. Sunday, all afternoon surrounded, exchanging newspapers. I came across the following. And then there's this long dialogue between someone being like questioned about their involvement in like a concentration camp and like whether or not they knew it was going on there or not. Even to the point where like one of the connecting points is that they're like, what did you think these camps are for? Where the enemies of our country were being re-educated. Did you see the list with arriving prisoners' names? There were such lists. Did you know that some names had a black cross put against them? I seem to recall that. Did you know what the black cross meant? No. It meant return undesirable. Did you know about the standing cells? About the gravel pit? Did you know that the rations were calculated to keep a man alive for a maximum of 3 months? No. Did you know there were gas chambers? Yes, but I had no occasion to speak about them. So like, I don't know where that's coming from. The Black Crosses thing connects back to his Black Crosses with the sex diary, but like, I really like, was he like a collaborationist? Is that what's being implied here?
I don't know. It almost feels like it's that idea of, you know, silence is violence, where, you know, like the Americans knew full well about concentration camps, but it wasn't worth the time or effort or the resources to do something about it yet. So they just kind of pretend it doesn't exist and plead innocence. I'm wondering if it has something to do with that.
Another possible reading. Another possible reading, and this relates to Nicholas Mosley, another Delkey author whose father was Sir Oswald Mosley, who during the war was detained for treason with his wife, one of the Mitford sisters, Nancy, maybe, I forget whichever one. And I don't mean that to sound dismissive, I just don't remember which names they are. But they were detained because he was like the pro-fascist side of things. And I wonder if like there isn't a way that you could read this where he's detained in Britain because he's British for not being pro-ally, but at least having some question mark. But there's something about him and his mom like crossing over, like escaping through the mountains. Like, I don't really know what's going on there. And that was one of the questions I had, of just like, who is this guy really?
Well, to be continued, I guess. Yeah.
Continued. And then like the section with her, I think they're I really do love their like back and forth. I think it's so funny.
Yeah, there's like some really interesting I'm really interested with, oh, go ahead.
Randomly underlined. Okay, so we always enjoyed the scenery. Scenery? Yeah, you know, views, birds, flowers, things she seemed to know everything by its proper name, made them up. How could she, Ruth? I'm sure she knew nothing about nature, not really. Like that's great, like back and forth, sort of like poking and prodding and like dismissing. Love it. But that part kind of makes sense. They find her journal, her tape recorder, her journals. Forgot about that. They're gonna look. If only she had a relative. They don't know what to do. They're very like really blasé about this woman's like suicide.
Yeah, they seem like not all that hung up about it, considering like, you know, they had a love triangle together and then she was gone and dead. It's like, yeah, I got interviewed with her. It took like 2 hours. I mean, what a
they're like,
what a hassle.
It happened on the 15th, and they're like, no, it was the 14th. Don't you even remember? It was on the Sunday when our car broke down. So wild. So then, what do you like? What's that going?
I find it really odd too with Leon, where like he still has like this like horn dog mentality at the beginning of this, even though what I assume to be the element that really kind of ignited that passion, that fire back in this relationship is dead and gone. Mm-hmm. He's just like constantly like horny in the beginning of this. And Ruth is just kind of like stop, don't, whatever, you know, like it's just a really strange dynamic for what recently just happened to them.
And it really does play off of like them wanting to have a child and him also being like semi-predatory in ways. But yeah, like so they're in the bath at one point, right? And she's like, stop, come on, man, what are you doing? And he's like, puts his tie back on. Like it's there's something that's very weirdly like British about like the visual of like this couple.
I said I was sorry, Ruth.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I cannot help it if your nipples are above the level of the water. I am but flesh and blood, you know. It's like oh my god. Yeah.
What did you think when you first hit I don't know what it is, audio tape, videotape, whatever it is, of like starting on page 17 with S's like crazy cut up sort of narration?
It almost like feels like a palate cleanser in some ways, because the the parts with the couple are just like giant paragraphs that go page upon page upon page.
And the font in this is too small.
Yeah, it's really small. And if you're getting older, like we are, and I read in low light a lot of the times, it's a lot of squinting.
I bought a brand new fucking light just to read this book. It's so bright. It can illuminate the world and I can see all the letters. It's amazing.
Yeah, I read at night a lot when everybody's already asleep. So I have like a lower light, and because I don't want to like turn all the lights on or whatever.
I'll hook you up.
There's nothing wrong. Sounds good. There's nothing wrong with the actual writing. The writing's great, but it can feel a little bit like a slog when you're confused a little bit and you're trying to figure out what's going on with these giant like chunks of writing, and then you get to that reads so fast, that has so much white space, but then it's like really quick and cut up really fast, and it's almost like when you watch like a Terrence Malick film, and there's like these little cut up images of the like internal thoughts of the character as they're doing some action or talking, like that it feels like that like, you know, that part of it where it's quick, it's imagistic, it's fast, and it's a really nice kind of palate cleanser from the big like chunk parts of Ruth and Leon, which I liked.
It reminds me, this is like a much lower brow in some ways reference than what you just made, but Mark Danielewski, when he wrote House of Leaves, when he was interviewed about that book, which I don't know if you've read, but it's like a horror novel about like a house that's like inches wider in the inside than it is on the outside. Like, I mean, crazy things can happen, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of pages within it. I don't have it anymore. I think I sold it for like weed when I was like at the bookstore, but the first edition, because why not? And like that, but I don't have it, so I can't show you, but there's lots of pages that are like a couple words on a page, or like it's turned, or like, and you move through it. And when he talked about it, he talked about wanting to create a cinematic experience in the way in which sometimes things are slow, and then you want the reader to speed up, and you want them to flip the page and to be having motion and to feel like things are in motion, and then slow down again, and like be able to control like the pace that someone moves through a book was like part of his construction of this like strange, like not found object, but like multi media sort of construction. And I think that this functions similarly, like what you say, like it hits that point and it's like, it's not logical. Like the first thing you read is like buildings where lights are stars, hours become hands, impressions stain, spread, recollections, angles caught in a mirror, spaces between clouds, tide marks, never rubbed out. Like none of that's like clear. So you sort of, I feel like it causes you to almost skim and just to take the impressions and to move through that part quickly.
Yeah, it almost felt like, you know, voyeuristic in some ways, where like you're reading something private, like a journal or something that it has meaning to somebody and not necessarily to me. And I'm trying to put the pieces together.
I was weirdly like, I named this podcast last week. I flipped through the book and just grabbed like a quote like I usually do. And then in reading it carefully, I marked the line as like my favorite line of the week, which is pursuit to the point of indiscretion, which is what I named the podcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is like a good marker.
My favorite line of the week was on page 22.
We don't have to do favorite lines of the week yet. I'm just like,
no, I know, but it just seemed like a perfect segue for it. But I thought it was interesting when I hadn't read Brian Evanson's introduction, but that idea of it being a play, and the thing that really stuck out to me was this line that starts the paragraph there: the hotel, a room, 3 beds, cupboards that never close. I really liked one. It kind of has like this idea of stage directions, but I kept noticing things going in and out of the cupboards and trying to like stuff things away, and this idea of the, you know, cupboards that never close.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really interesting. This part was confusing to me in terms of like who she was meeting, like with her father. And like if you read it like it is a Ann Quin's biography. Hold on.
Sounds like
dogs. This is why I hate dogs.
Are you dog sitting?
Yeah, and I abhor it. I'm already abhorring it. It's been 1 hour approximately. I'm already done with this. You know what I
was afraid.
Don't
I was
cry.
afraid it was your. I was afraid it was your kid, and I thought, man, your kid sounds like a dog. I don't want to,
Come on, guilty. Just please, please, just stop. The her thing was confusing as to like what is being represented here. Like how like I had two. These are my two questions for you. Guilty, sit. One is what is being represented? Is it like her early life and like that, like up through this abortion part? And the second one would be because the abortion ends this section of her. I don't know what these are, videotapes, audio tapes. But the second is like, what are they? Yeah, audio tapes, videotapes. How is this like being represented to Leon and Ruthie? Because I assume that they're reading it and that this is something that in which they are reading in like the broadest sense of like seeing and or hearing and interpreting. God fucking damn it.
I don't mean to laugh at your pain and your frustration, but I do. So yeah, maybe I do mean to laugh.
There are lines that one should not cross.
I know you're a dog person too.
Oh yeah, I love dogs. Like I think dogs are the best. They are.
I think you were boring the dog. Get to your question. What do you want to know?
The two questions I had are one, is this about her early life? About S's early life? Or like what period of her life is this relating? And then two, how do you think it's being related? Like what is the medium that they are absorbing this through? Is it an audio tape? Is it a video? Because it's referenced several times as like audio and video, and like there's no clear indication here to me as to what that would be. But it seems like an audio tape, but also it feels to me like an audio tape that's like a Burroughs cut up, where it's like, here's the story, but I chopped it into these like little particulates, but like little bits that like are kind of jammed together, because you get like the Ann Quin story. Her father runs away. She finds her father. She has a meeting with him. She wants to be an actress. It doesn't work out. She has an abortion, which I don't know is the real part of her life, but like feels very realistic here, I'll say. She goes to the convent. That's where she's like, goes to school. And that's true. The Ann Quin's life is that she goes to a convent, and that's where she's like educated for most of her life. Like all that is like kind of biographical, and it ties into Joshua Cohen's bit of like that this is a very personal book, that would be the kind of personal side to it. I also do not doubt in any way, shape, or form, and I do not want to like make this, I don't want this to be like a real thing, but the fact that it's dedicated to Bobby and Bob, I kind of feel like this is not a little bit personal in that sense too.
Yeah.
The suicide.
Yeah, that's one thing. No, and then too, like there was the history that S has with the like deviant behavior, or what would be considered deviant behavior, I guess. I don't really judge people what they want to do, but with the partners, and then showing up with this other couple and how she's going to impact or change them as well.
And this is why I think it's a tape too, is that on page 40, right after it ends, it says Leonard leaned forward, legs apart, man spreading. Leonard leaned forward, man spreading, body suspended in an enclosed area, 2 chairs, table, tape recorder. I really like the clippedness of the 60s, like sort of like writing. I really like that. Like when I wrote short stories, I would use it a lot. Like of like the bang, 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 rather than like there's a table and there's a tape recorder on it and blah, 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 blah. Like just fucking give me the nouns, man. I don't need no explanation. So she drowns. Let's see, there's another thing that I wanted to ask you about specifically. I don't know what else.
I haven't made sense out of this one yet, but I keep reading it and I like it. I almost have to like draw it out to make sense for it. It's on page 21, where it's a plan devised for their amusement with masks, situation, insoluble. 3 points, A, B, and C, on a rigid body in a straight line. when the points A and C being given B is chosen such that the sum of distances AB and BC is as short as possible. Suggestion: A walks past B and C. A might turn, stop, shrug, walk on. B and C watch, perhaps follow A, or separate. Possibly disappear together. Variations endless.
Oh, I really like that, and that reflects then in a new way in 66, where in her diary she says, Saturday, my suggestion, Elle made a platform. We improvise, we both write little scenarios with which our half-heartedly joins in. We improvise as we go along. My favorite one with the mass is just the three of us. Two reject one, or one rejects two, or all three reject each other, or equally accept.
Yeah, again, it's like this idea of like the, you know, the stage and the play, and I don't know, it's kind of like a mind fuck in a way, where you kind of are they playing out what's real? Is what's real? Like, I don't know, you get lost within what's heads and what's tails. But I like that. I think it's really cool.
I think that's really cool too. And I feel like it's like, yeah, it is like not metonymy, but like on that line of like where they're playing out these scenarios, because like there's a lot that goes on in the second half of this this first section, like the second quarter of the book, I suppose, where the three of them are involved. Like they're lying in bed with Ruthie watching TV. Like she and Leonard, like she has like migraine problems. They listen to concerts together. It is like a throuple in that way. But then when it comes to like the sexual activity, the one part that's very explicit is on page where is this? 71, when it gets real dirty. And this is the part that I said I was going to read, and we're 41 minutes in. So anyone who's still here, get ready, buckle up. In the dark, the outline of the fire escape, I chose the night spent in shared fantasies of other places and places that replaced boundaries of bed, floor, walls, a cliff edge, the sea spilling into sky, back to front, kneeling like dogs, he said, arms stretched out, bodies arched, more submission demanded, and rolling over as in waves, with the waves that later came, kept coming. I want to fuck you on stairways, in telephone booths, in public places, tie you up and let them all see you, fuck you, do what they will, and whip you, lick you, and fuck you again. Which then becomes like very clear, like her and Leonard, I think, part are like, because Ruth keeps being like, well, you guys always went out to the beach and all that shit, like, and she doing these things, blah blah.
I didn't know you liked the sea so much.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that you really enjoyed walking in the sea, and you're always so dirty when you come home.
Yeah, interesting. I forgot that connection though with when she's talking about like the Catholic school stuff with the whipping. That's in there as well.
Yep.
And the red knees, right? The red knees you'd think would be from kneeling in prayer, but there's that doubleness to
sort of
the whipping. Yeah. Interesting. That's good writing.
Yeah.
Not bad. Not bad.
I really like the challenge of this book. Like it is strenuous. Like I wish this book were 250 pages long in terms of its printing. It should be very airy. It should be a lot easier to read than this fucking shit. Like this. Thank you, whoever first printed this, because this is the same offset that Delke used and the same offset that they use. It's like from whatever Simon and Schuster way back when.
69.
But if this were longer and easier to read, I really like physically easy to read. I really like getting into it and not knowing what is happening. I have so many question marks like along the side. Let me see if there's just like one that just pops up here. But like it feels like it came like over and over, just be like, I don't know what this is. Like, I feel like I know what's going on, but not really. I know like a broad outline, but the specifics are like evading me. And I kind of like that. I like being confused in that way versus like feeling like, oh, I know everything that's going on. I'm going to analyze this character according to these proper principles and everyone's great. So yeah, pro S and Leonard getting it on, pro like all this like shit. Love it. Great book. Ann Quin.
Well, so we are finishing it for next week, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then what's interesting is that Passages, which is the next book that she wrote, was my least favorite because it is all poetry. Like, and I don't think the first time I read it, I didn't get it. Like, I just didn't get it. So I'm excited to like reread it and try and understand poetry-ish thing.
Okay.
But
okay, I'll tell you not a personal story, but for next week we'll open with a menage a trois story. So.
Oh, wait, what's your menage a trois story?
It's no, it's not mine. I think it's good for next week. That'll be our cliffhanger, so to speak. The cliffhanger by the beach.
Your menage a trois story.
It's not my story, but it's a menage a trois story.
From what I've heard, according to this teaser, it's your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't know, Brian Wood, Rochester, New York, swinger extraordinaire. If you're looking for menage a trois, contact 1 Capron building. It just fucking doxed you online.
Yeah, here's my IP address if you want to find couples near you.
If you want to find a couple, are you tall?
Yeah.
Oh shit!
Next week
we're going to talk about Ann Quin some more, and we're going to talk about 3. I don't have anything else. That was my favorite. That was my favorite line. Is the one that we named it after. Pursuit to the point of indiscretion, which I think is really fucking solid line. But I think the whole thing is really interesting. I think she's great, and I get captivated by this. I do wish that the font was bigger because I'm old, and I'm going to keep harping on that. And that's just
how great would that be? I think we should end with this, but how great would that be? I'd watch more football games if there was a penalty for pursuit to the point of indiscretion.
Yeah,
15-yard penalty.
Pursuit to the point of indiscretion. Pursuit to the point of goddamn dogs. That's all I'm gonna say. I know that we've lost like 90% of our viewership due to my distaste for dog animals. And I don't dislike them. I just have a lot of issues. But like, come on. Anyways, if you're listening to this still, you can always sponsor us at Patreon. You can always rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, which would be very helpful and help us with the algorithm and get us more listeners. Tell your friends, tell your family, go to Thanksgiving and be like, you know what you all should do is listen to the 2-month review, like live. Like we'll do it live on the day before Thanksgiving. It can be like your lead up to like a good Thanksgiving dinner in which you talk about Trump running again and the red wave happen.
Have an extra glass of wine and maybe mix things up a little bit. Go outside. I don't know. Get
a menage a trois. Maybe this will make your Thanksgiving that much more interesting. I mean, that would be wild. If you went to I went to family Thanksgiving and it became like some sort of weird sex cult. Therefore, let's do this.
Yeah. Uncle Ron's gonna ruin it. I know it.
You know he always is. But she's gonna be fine. Except for the suicide. God, I don't know. I just backed myself into a bad corner. Anyways, thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week. We're gonna finish 3 and move on. Very exciting. Ann Quin's the best. Take care. Você